Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is your friendly neighborhood Slytherin, Ren. Yes, I'm wearing this large fluffy fleece marigold shirt. That's because these are my pajamas and they're very warm. And I'm still sick, that's why my voice kind of still sounds hoarse as well. I just figured that it would be great to just prioritize comfort this weekend. You know, I don't have to wear an Instagram thought pole dancer outfit every single time that I appear on social media. Plus, this shirt has Snoopy on it, okay? This is from Uniqlo, which, you know, me and Uniqlo have kind of a complicated relationship, but I will say that their Peanuts collaborations always slap, okay? And they're always super comfy and cute. Oh, look at that. Kind of makes me want to go back to sleep right now. Okay, so today, as I'm sure you can tell by the thumbnail and title, we are going to be testing out and reviewing the new Sugarpill Capsule 3 C3 collection in the black edition. All black on, black top shades, black top made. So I have all three actually that came out so far. This is C1, C2, and now C3. Unfortunately, I did throw out the outside packaging for the first two, so I can't exactly compare because it says only on the back of the outside plastic box the breakdown of the types of eyeshadow formulas. I'm assuming it's the same for each palette, but it might slightly vary. I don't think it's that important, but there might be a different mix of formulas. Just FYI. So for the black one, it says that there's one blush, which is true for all of them. The large pan right here is first and foremost a blush color, and then this one has 4 metallics and 5 mattes. Packaging wise, straight away I do have to say that this one is hands down my best. I didn't realize when I was purchasing this isn't just any old black capsule collection. This is a Slytherin capsule collection, okay? Do you see the green and black color combo here? Iconic. Yeah, like when I bought this, I kind of just bought it without thinking too much about it because Sugarpill is a brand started by an Asian American woman, Amy Doan. It's been around for a long time, and I feel like sometimes it doesn't get enough props or attention, mostly because, in my opinion at least, Sugarpill as a brand, as well as the owner herself, tend to stay out of drama. I honestly think that that's a big part of why people don't talk about them more often. So whenever Sugarpill comes out with something new, even if it's not something that I'm particularly looking for or needing at the moment, I'm very inclined to support them. Just to put that out on the record, okay? I don't have a problem saying that. It is a brand that I'm definitely, like, I'm looking for excuses, I'm looking for opportunities to support them and give them a chance, if you know what I mean. For the most part, they have great pigmentation, great blendability, all of that, but if I'm 100% honest, it is not my favorite eyeshadow formula on the market, but it is good enough, and I also feel a close enough affinity to the brand as an Asian American woman myself to support. Okay, so really quickly before I dive into swatches and application, I just want to mention a few minor things. I noticed when comparing the palette descriptions on the Sugarpill website, these two palettes are made in LA, Los Angeles, California, while the black palette is made in Italy. And honestly, after even swatching this for the first time, I could tell that there was something a little more elevated about this palette as compared with the first two. Not that everything produced in Italy is automatically going to be better quality than something produced in LA, okay? I'm not one of those people that's like discriminatory based on where something is produced necessarily, but for the most part, Italian produced cosmetics have had a pretty good reputation throughout history. Another little tiny little thing that I noticed, it doesn't necessarily bother me, but I kind of just felt like if they had managed to just iron out this one tiny detail and make it consistent for all three palettes, they would just look so much better in my opinion. Maybe you might notice if I hold them all up side by side like this. Okay, it's hard to hold 3 palettes with 2 hands. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Look around at the perimeter of the palettes. Yeah, so the first 2 palettes both have a white border. Even though they're pink and orange, they both have a white border, whilst the black palette, the black capsule, has a black border to match the pill color. I definitely prefer this monochromatic look over these two. This is still cute, don't get me wrong, and I wouldn't even have noticed if they didn't make the third palette slightly different. I'm not complaining or anything, I'm just particular about certain details. I think that's a big reason why myself, as well as many other people, are a fan of Japanese cosmetics, because they do pay attention to the smallest minute little details like that. Even when it comes to just the design or the packaging, even when it's a drugstore product, it always feels like just a step above what most Western brands are offering. So I'm gonna do a colorful halo eye, maybe different colors on both eyes. Actually, I should probably do that just to showcase as many of the shades as possible. I'm starting off with this little triad down here on my left eye. It's like a mustard yellow.
Mustard? Don't let's be silly.
A mossy green. It looks lighter in the camera right now, but it's has a little bit of smoke to it, and this orange shimmer right here. So we should end up with a very citrus looking eye. Okay, I'm gonna start off by dipping into Grim. I love that you can see my face through this palette because of the clear backing here. It's so cool. Okay, then I'm going to take a clean, fluffier brush that I can use for blending. This one is too big, but it's clean, so 1 out of 2 requirements fulfilled, I guess. And just blend that out, especially concentrating on the top here, because that's where I want the gradient to gradually like fade out. Then I'm gonna go back with that same mustard yellow and sort of darken up the outer and inner corners. Buff that out. This is something that I'm really trying to get in the habit of, can you tell? Just making sure that I take my time and blend properly through each step. Then using the same brush, I'm going to add some of this Oogie color. So I'm layering this on top of the yellow, the Grim shade, in the areas where I concentrated it a little more, but I'm going to take care to make sure that Oogie doesn't extend past Grim, because I'm trying to create like a gradient layer of different colors. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll just do it. So you see I kind of placed that green like 2/3 of the way on top of the yellow in the inner and outer corner of my eye where I concentrated that yellow shade the most. Blend again with the fluffy brush and hold the brush further down the handle so that you don't apply too much pressure to one place. Otherwise that can easily end up looking patchy. You really want to, you're like purposely weakening the force of your hand so that it distributes more evenly over the eyelid, which will in turn give you a softer, a more seamless blend. I know it's hard at first because even now it's like I'm not used to this. I'm actually pretty guilty sometimes of holding my brush really close to the base or the bristles. At first you really feel this resistance, or I do at least, to holding the brush down so low on the handle because it feels like you're losing control and oh my god, I'm going to fling eyeshadow everywhere. That's not the case, I assure you. The eyeshadow's already stuck on your lid, okay? Especially if you have a good primer on underneath, so have no fear. Okay, I almost wish that there was an even deeper like forest green color in here because I feel like there's not enough contrast here with the gradient. I'm gonna cheat and pull from, okay, I'm gonna use Double Shot from the C2 collection, the orange capsule. Yeah, I'll take a clean brush for this one. This is just a classic matte coffee brown. I was thinking of doing black at first, but I feel like brown would blend in better with the green. You know, it's like very naturey, trees type of vibe. We're applying the same principle that I did with the first round of layering of the green on top of the yellow. This time I'm also only covering part of the moss green with the brown. But I'm also still taking care to leave this area very open for some shimmer, which is like the most fun part of any eye look, am I right? Well, maybe not, but for a halo eye though, it is kind of the whole point. Taking the tiniest little pointer brush that I can find. I don't even like this brush really, it's too stiff, but it works for what I'm about to do, which is usually I don't even go into this much detail because I'm impatient, but I can't deny that it looks better this way when you pretty much mimic, or at least you continue the design that you've done on your top lid down to the bottom, if that makes sense. I'm actually gonna put a little more of that green on the corners here because I just realized I didn't close it out. I kind of left it open, which you can do, but I want it to be kind of a more rounded shape on the outer corner, so I'm going to close that up, add a little more brown. That's getting a little muddy, but only because my blending skills are still very novice. If I were better at blending, I feel like it would really showcase the beauty of this formula, like how well each color stands on its own. Even when you combine and blend with other colors, you can still, for the most part, see a clear demarcation between each shade. Alright, that looks pretty good to me. I usually only ever bring eyeshadow up to the halfway mark on my lower eyelid because that gives me the most balanced effect for my eye shape in particular. If I brought color all the way up to the inner corner, if I brought color all the way up to the inner corner here, it would quickly just close off my eye. Now I'm taking some extra eye primer onto this tiny flat domed brush. Your brush doesn't have to be this tiny, this just happens to be the only clean one that I have. You can just use a regular old dome-shaped flat brush. In my experience, it's never a bad idea to go smaller though, just to err on the safe side. Smaller brushes mean more precision, so even if you feel like you need to switch to a big brush in the middle, you can do that and it's not going to affect your look negatively, whereas if you start out with a brush that's too big, you might mess everything up from the jump. Before I apply the shimmer, I'm just going to clean up, or I don't know, close up I should say, the edges here because I feel like the primer went slightly a little farther than I wanted to, which is normal. Totally normal. All you have to do is just go back in with your original colors. Now we're going to take our finger, dip it into Fire Starter. I think I read on their website or an Instagram post somewhere, it basically said that their metallic formula is best applied with a finger, so that's what I'm doing. I'm still gonna go in with a flat brush though, just to create that really sharp line at the top here to really define this crease, because that was the whole point of layering more eye primer on. Ideally, I would be doing this with a straight flat brush, but I don't have one of those, so I'm just using my angled brush from Mitsuyoshi. I love this brush. I think it's like weasel hair or something like that. Whatever it is, these bristles have fantastic give and grip. Now, you guessed it, blend. Just the side edges though. I'm leaving the top alone because I want to keep the sharp line there. Last step before I move on to the other eye, I just want to add a final layer of green. I just want to add a final layer of oogie on top, the moss green color, because I feel like it got a little muddy here due to my sloppy blending. And I really did intend for this to be a moss green with a pop of orange. I didn't want it to be brown. Okay, I think that is as good as we're gonna get with this eye. Now let's move on to my right eye, and we're gonna play around with the purples and blues here. Okay, Maxine wants to say hi, in case you couldn't hear her chirping all throughout the first half of this video. Oh, what, now you're silent? You gotta be kidding me. She has been chirping nonstop this week. She's just a very talkative little lady all of a sudden. You were like silent for the past 3 months, almost. Wow, you really have nothing to say after making all that noise. Okay, mommy's gonna get back to filming. So, prepping the second eye. I forgot that I initially wanted to use a white eyeshadow base. Whenever you're dealing with neon colors, it always helps to use a white base to make those colors pop more, especially if it's the type of shade that tends to blend in with your skin tone or make it look muddy, like olive green for me. But it's not the end of the world, so let's just keep moving on. I'm going to use Gloomy as my transition color. Is that what they call it? I mean, I would say crease color, but it's not my actual crease though, because my actual crease is down here, this tiny little thing. It's this tiny little fold right here. So I'm creating the illusion of like a fake crease all the way up here, you see? Blend that out with a clean brush as always. Then we're going to deepen up the corners with Coven. Okay, so my camera battery died and I just didn't have the patience to wait for it to charge and then finish everything on camera again. So I just finished up everything off camera. You didn't miss anything, I promise you. It was literally, I used the same technique on my right eye that I used on my left eye. Let me just run through the colors again though, if you're interested. So for my left eye, I used these 3 down here, as well as this warm brown shade, Double Shot from the orange palette. And then for my right eye, I went ahead with, let's see, Gloomy, Coven, Purgatory, and Ritual for the sort of center shimmer there. I thought I would go ahead and combine the pinks and the blues for my right eye because I had a feeling that this shade right here, this really deep royal blue, once layered on top of these pinks and purples, I thought that that would create a really nice violet transition shade so that like the two colors blend together well, but you can also still see distinctly all the different shades that make up the look. I think I was right about that. It turned into like a very nice deep violet color, this blue, when layered on top of the pinks and purples. For my lips, I have on this Cinderella packaged crayon lip pencil thingy. It's called the Volume Balm Lip from Integrate. Yes, I did buy these. I did a mini review on one of their eyeliners that came out with the Cinderella collaboration. If you want to see a second video where I review both of these little crayon lip balms, I can do that for you. Spoiler alert, it's actually super moisturizing and I'm kind of in love, as you can see clearly. This one is in the shade Pink 370. They have another one that's a rosy type of shade, so I picked both of them up. If you're interested in seeing that review, leave me a like. So I do want to add one last step of this blush on my cheeks before I give you my final thoughts and summary of what I think about this palette. So I'm very wary of using the blush, so-called blush pans in these capsule palettes because honestly, if it didn't say in the description or on the packaging that this large pan was meant to be a blush shade, I would have just assumed and accepted them as a huge highlighter. One consistency throughout all 3 palettes is that this blush shade, I feel like it's pretty much exactly the same formula as the rest of the matte eyeshadow formula. Like, do you see that? I literally just tapped it on my cheek and it's reading as a total just standard pigmented matte eyeshadow because that's what it is. Listen, I understand the appeal that they're trying to go for, like, oh, it's a face palette, you know, you can use it not only on your eyes, but there's a blush color in here too. I mean, I just don't see the point of that differentiation if the formula is going to be the same as an eyeshadow formula anyway, right? I could just as well use this purple or this pink right here for a blush. I think it's kind of silly and pointless to call this particular pan a blush color just because it happens to be slightly bigger than the rest. I'm not complaining, I just want people to know if you're thinking of picking up this palette, don't expect this formula to be a significantly different texture or finish than the rest of the matte eyeshadows in here, because as far as I can tell, it's not. As I continue to pile on more and more unnecessarily. Okay, sorry, let me just add some highlighter. This is MAC Double Gleam Extra Dimension Skin Finish. Dust that on there. Okay, so there you have it. This is the finished look. Even though I feel like objectively, both in terms of color combination and blending, this eye looks better, it's always the eye that I don't manage to film myself through the whole process of application. Really annoying. I like this eye better, but ironically this eye kind of matches my shirt perfectly today, right? I think I will go ahead and say that this is probably my favorite out of all three palettes, and I do think that the formula is also more consistent. Obviously I didn't get to every color today, so I'm still gonna have to play around. I may change my mind later, but tentatively I'm going to say that I do consider this palette to be the superior out of all three. Just for those of you out there, if you're agonizing over which one you should pick up, if you don't want to buy all of them, I would say go for this one. I mean, it depends on what colors you're into though. Like the C1 pink palette has much lighter, more pastel tones than this one. This is called the black palette after all. Whereas C2, I feel like this one is the most approachable and versatile in terms of everyday, maybe erring on the more neutral side of eyeshadow looks. For those of you that may want to experiment with a few pops of color, but you don't want to venture too much out of your neutral routine, I would say that this one might appeal to you the most. Yeah, it is hard to say like which one is superior over the other because each palette is also very kind of all over the place. Like there's a bunch of different colors in each palette. The most cohesive one in terms of sticking to a particular color family would definitely be the orange palette, because this one, you can see that pretty much every shade in this palette except for this green and turquoise are warm, rosy, blush brown tones, whereas these two are just kind of all over the place, like a rainbow of colors in each palette, except it's just that this one is more pastel and this one is more deeper jewel toned colors. So if you're someone who looks for more of a true color theme, like a monotone theme with each palette, you might enjoy C2 the most. Formula wise though, so let me just get to the formula because I feel like maybe that's the best way to evaluate these. I do think that C3 is better. I don't know if it's because this one is made in Italy and the other ones are made in LA. Maybe this one has better ingredients, who knows? But all I can say is that when I was swatching these, I could tell right away that at first when I was doing an initial swatch through of this palette, I wasn't crazy about the formulas in here, like the matte and the shimmers, because I felt like they were just a little too tightly packed together. I had to press really hard in order to get the swatch to actually stick to my arm. But that being said, the colors do show up really pigmented and saturated at the end of the day. And also, just because it was a more difficult swatching experience, I feel that that is completely unrelated to my experience when applying these on my eyes, because I actually think that I had a very easy time blending and applying these shadows to my eyelids, which is impressive. I mean, you saw how many times I blended and kept adding more layers of color, different colors, and I think I may have overdone it a little bit on my left eye because it's looking a little muddy, but that was my fault for kind of over blending. And also the fact that for this type of a grungy green color, sometimes I feel like these colors sort of get lost or they look ashy against my skin tone. If I would have remembered to use a white eyeshadow base instead of my regular flesh toned one, I feel like these colors, like particularly this green and this dusty yellow, would have popped better. Now, I do have to mention one huge disappointment that I came across when using this. It's the fact that this orange shimmer, the finish is totally different from like this cobalt blue. And it's the fact that this orange metallic shade, they're called metallics. I think I've been calling them shimmers by accident throughout this whole video, but this is, Sugarpill calls this a metallic. So yeah, this orange metallic had such a different finish from this cobalt blue one. I think you can even see right now through the camera The orange metallic comes off so much more dull and rusty than the cobalt blue. Like this blue, you can see it sparkles and shimmers and catches the light at a million different angles. Whereas this orange one, no matter how many times I tried to build it up, I used my finger, I used a brush. I think I even added like more eye primer at one point just to try and get it to pop, and it never quite got there. It's just, there's no impact whatsoever. It looks almost flat even when I move back and forth. There's no standout sparkly metallic shimmery quality for the light to catch onto. Pretty disappointing, not only because I just don't find this finish to be, like, I think it's super boring. I don't think it's special or exciting at all, but also for the fact that that speaks to such an inconsistency between the metallic shades in this palette, which are all supposedly formulated the same way, right? Like, it's just completely different effect. So I was bummed out about that. I actually think that this color right here is the outlier out of all the metallic shades in here. So the other shades, like this violety blue and this pink right here, and is that it? Yeah. The finish on these, you can see even just from the finger swatch, they're coming off very similar to the way that this orange looks. That's just so boring to me, you know? Nothing wrong with the formula, like it blends well, it's even, etc, etc. But I feel like I would have been so much more impressed if every single metallic shade in here was like this blue. Look at the contrast there in terms of just how much more light this electric blue catches. Okay, I want to end this on a positive note though, and I forgot what to say. Minimal fallout with this palette. Really fantastic. I feel like I'm rambling on forever, like I don't know how to close out this video. I guess I will just leave you with this last little observation that I made. I don't know if I'm imagining this or if I'm right or whatever, but just from what I can discern as an owner of all three palettes. So first of all, on the whole, I think I've said this a couple of times before as well, but Sugarpill's eyeshadow formulas on the whole, particularly their matte shades, are very tightly packed together, and that goes not only for the Capsule collection palettes, but also the fun size palette, which I have as well. I don't have it in front of me right now, but that one is like that one is an all matte palette actually. So yeah, I found that Sugarpill mattes on the whole are very, very tightly packed together, which is good on two fronts. Number one, they're more shatter proof than other shadows with maybe a softer formula or a flakier formula. And number two, I feel like they stick to your eye better, especially if you have a nice tacky primer that does its job well. They'll stick to that primer and they won't migrate all over your face, which is really crucial for everyone, but particularly for us girlies with flat eyelids or fattier eyelids. Now, the issue that you may run into with a more tightly packed eyeshadow formula is that it doesn't transfer to your lid that easily, or you find that you have to apply more pressure to get the color to show up. And I feel like that was definitely more of the case in the C1 capsule than it was in the subsequent two. It could also be the fact that these are mattes, you know, not necessarily that the formula is different or anything. Again, I don't know for sure, but like this periwinkle blue, for example, and then even this blue down here, which is supposed to be like a shimmery iridescent type of thing, but it actually almost comes off as matte because I feel like the iridescent effect is just so weak. I felt that it was a little bit more difficult to build up color, and sometimes I would run into patchiness issues and stuff with this palette. That issue, I feel like, was thankfully absent from the second capsule collection. Here, with this palette, or at least with this selection of shades that they offer, I felt like you got the best of both worlds, right? You got like a nice tightly packed formula that was easy to control, but at the same time it packed a lot of punch and you didn't have to spend too much energy or force trying to actually transfer the product to your eyelid. And it was also very easily blendable. So I think these two are superior in that respect. The problem with this one is that, well, for me, namely these two shades up here, they're like, this one in particular is super soft. So it's like, it almost feels like they went the other direction, or they overcorrected, decided to make these shades softer so that it was easier for people to pick them up on their brush. But then it ended up being a little bit too soft in the other direction, and I find that these are just really messy and they give you a lot of fallout. So this one is Elevate and this one is Moonshine. Actually, this one too, Skyrise. So you see it's like the minute you dip your finger in there, it's super chunky and fall out everywhere. For the C3 collection, this one definitely struck the best balance out of all 3 collections so far. So even for this Ritual shade right here, which you would expect to be the chunkiest because it is the shiniest, it's actually very firm to the touch. And so it's like you can dig your finger in there without having to worry about the shadow crumbling to a million pieces. But then look at that. The color payoff is there, the pigmentation, the density is all there in one swipe. So yeah, for C3, at least with the metallic shades, they must have done some sort of tweaking to the formula because I don't feel anywhere near the kind of crumbliness and softness that I felt in their orange palette, which like it's to the point where I'm afraid to use these 2 colors because they just crumble at like a whisper at the whisper of a feather. Anyway, I think I rambled on for long enough. Let's see what else I can cram into this video before I leave. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, but this palette is vegan. If you're not familiar with Sugarpill, they've always been a cruelty-free brand. That's excellent. We stan. I know that Amy, the creator, has her own pets, and I think she has a dog. As a fellow pet owner and animal lover in general, I really appreciate the vegan aspect of this brand. Okay, I'm really gonna leave after this, but the one thing that I did find really weird about this one is that it seemed like it came out of nowhere. I didn't really hear any buzz or hints about this 3rd installment dropping, and then all of a sudden one day it's like, a surprise, new release, new capsule collection release, you know, it's the black palette, which is actually not even like, if you took these colors out of this black pill packaging and put them in some regular packaging, my mind would not immediately associate this with Halloween or dark things remotely whatsoever. I mean, that's fine though, because it looks good in the black palette, so it's like, you know, it's a whole concept, right? The fact that they call it the black palette, you can see it once they tell you the name. It's like, oh, okay, it's giving me insane clown vibes. So concept wise, whatever, it works. But I just thought it was super weird how sudden this palette release was, and also the fact that it was on October 30th, which is one day before Halloween. You would think that a palette that is specifically made to fit in with the theme of Halloween, dark things, dark makeup, I would have expected them to come out with this at least a month earlier. I'm thinking, this is just my complete third-party speculation, but I'm thinking that they might have had some issues with scheduling on the back end of things. Maybe it was something to do with COVID, you know? Everything's been getting delayed and thrown off whack this year for that reason, so it's not really a surprise, and I don't blame them. But I just feel like, for some reason, I just feel like there was some sort of delay or obstacle that they were facing with the production of this palette until they finally just couldn't hold it off any longer and had to resort to releasing it a day before Halloween, which means that nobody who bought this palette would have had it in time for Halloween to do a Halloween look, you know? And oh my god, maybe because it's made in Italy. I feel like that might have something to do with it. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I just say all that to say that I feel that the timing was a little bit off with the release of this palette, especially considering that they're releasing the 4th palette so soon after this. I'm trying not to hold it against Sugarpill as a brand because I understand there's limitations, especially as an indies brand, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit salty about the fact that they released C4 so soon after C3. And not only that, but they're now selling the bundle of all 4 capsule collections on their site for a significantly discounted rate than I've paid to purchase each one individually. I don't regret buying each one right after it was released. Obviously, that's the only way that I would have been able to do my YouTube reviews in a timely manner. I'm a little bit salty that I won't be able to get the savings from the 4 palette bundle pack that they now have available on their website. So that's good news for all of you guys if you've been eyeing these, because now you can get all 4 for, what is it, $142. Okay, that's still not super cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than buying them individually. Because remember, I'm in Tokyo, so I also have to pay for international shipping and stuff. And yeah, it adds up. I think on average I probably paid, I found a few discount coupon codes here and there, so that shaved off a little bit of the shipping price at least, but on average I think I did pay around $50 for each palette if you include shipping and handling and all that. So it's like, if I do go ahead and decide that I want to buy the 4th palette right now, that's $200 that I would have spent on this entire collection when I could have just paid $150 for the bundle. Such is the lot of a YouTuber. Why do I have this like underlying fear of my shadow self that I'm gonna go ahead and buy the bundle anyway, even though I already own 3 of the palettes? As the great woman Makeup Struggles once said, bitches love bundles, right? I'm leaving. Okay, I'm leaving, for real.